Good morning.
Today is Sunday, December 17, 2023. This will be the last class of 2023. The next 2 weeks is New Year, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, and people are traveling and things like that. So we'll start the new year with a review of meditation and technique, and I don't know, hopefully make good aspirations for the new year. Speaking of aspirations, let's say the four immeasurables. Prayer, as we do every week, set our intentions by saying, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. So I'm going to read something, a quote from His Holiness Sakya Trizin, who is four major schools of Tibetan Buddhism, and the Sakya school of Tibetan Buddhism. The head of that school, if you will, is the Sakya Trizin. So this is and I'll read this, and then Victoria is going to speak a bit about something she's prepared, and then we'll meditate after that, and then do questions. This is about anger, which I'm sure we all know a lot about. When you are angry, this inner anger reflects, and the enemy appears outside. If you try to destroy your enemy in anger, the other side will also get angry, and the situation will get worse. Even if you destroy an enemy, there will be another enemy, and more enemies will emerge. Instead of defeating external enemies, you must regard your own anger as the real enemy, the enemy who causes suffering. The true enemy is not outside, but inside your own mind. Even if you can't get rid of your anger completely, trying to see things this way will help you reduce it. I think a lot of us understand that and know how anger can be very destructive and what an obstacle it can be. And a lot of us also say, but isn't there good anger? Righteous anger? Can anger kind of be a motivating factor to make a stand in certain cases, in certain incidents, in certain issues, or things like that? And a couple of things just to mention with that. I happen to think righteous anger are two things: righteousness and anger together, not one thing. Righteous anger not being an aspect of anger, but a sense of righteousness combined with the emotion of anger. And perhaps righteousness is more effective without anger. The example of martial artists or boxers, someone like Muhammad Ali, who was one of the most skillful boxers that ever lived, right? He liked to taunt his opponent to get them angry, because he felt if once they got angry, their skillfulness decreased, because the emotion clouded the kind of sharp, tactical skillfulness you needed to really be a great boxer, which he was. And then he would exploit their anger against them, because that anger can make them lose composure and be maybe forceful, but a little bit wilder, and he'd exploit that. And a lot of martial artists speak of that as well, that the control needed to be effective that way decreases when anger comes into play there. But we are going to get angry. We do get angry for many different reasons. And I think instead of looking at anger as this bad thing when it arises, note when we notice it and try to really use the same techniques we use sitting here and working with our thoughts and things like that with anger, and understand that it's there and recognize it's there sometimes, and then almost separating it from the next action, how you want to engage with whatever's happening. Because once we recognize it and acknowledge it, we don't have to be led by it. Not easy. Anger and reacting out of anger can be something that's deeply ingrained and habitual, default mechanism for a lot of us. And sometimes that feeling, there's been times when early in the morning, wake up, go sit down and meditate, and something's bothering me from, the night before, the day before, the week before, some situation with another person usually that hasn't been resolved. That's got me very angry, and there's an energy of anger. It's not just so easy as like, a distracted thought when we sit to meditate. Oh, there's a noise outside, I'm distracted. I have an appointment at 5 o'clock, I'm distracted by it. Anger can have a real energetic quality that is very, very physical in addition to mental. And with practice, we can learn to kind of just sit with that, recognize that it's there, and really transform that energy. The whole, and Victoria's gone into it many times about, transforming these negative emotions into wisdom, and that only comes from really working with our stuff. Being able to transform that energy of anger into some kind of clarity on how you want to engage and interact and use yourself in situations with others and with the world. You're learning. The wisdom is coming not from somebody telling you something, although we need to learn this from a teacher. We're learning this today from Sakya Trizin, but it's coming from you working with your own mind. And in a sense, it's really a very kind of quintessential example of basically what practice is. With that, Victoria's going to speak for a bit.
We've spoken about this many times, and I feel like it's still worth many more conversations, because the important things we have to habituate, we have to repeat to ourselves, we have to reignite the mechanisms of how to go from afflictive emotions to space of wisdom. And so, I think this kind of how suffering arises and how to understand karma conversation has to happen over and over again. Garchen Rinpoche says that from self-grasping, the 5 afflictive emotions arise. From that, the 6 realms of samsara follow. The cause of samsara, cause of suffering, is self-grasping. The basis of grasping is ignorance. Ignorance pertains to ignorance of nature of reality, our own, and of everything we perceive. And it's ignorance of, the true condition of how things arise, and also of our true condition. In Buddhism, another word for ignorance is dualistic mind. It is the ordinary way in which we function all the time on this relative level. This dualistic mind divides everything into 2 parts: the me, the self, and the things that I perceive, my world, the others. But everything happens in terms of the self. The conceptual mind inherently has the structure of this me looking at the world, and it happens so continuously and on such a subtle level we never even think of it. And so because everything happens from the center of the self, and it happens so quickly, we forget, if we don't bring the wisdom aspect with us and we don't bring this tremendous conscious energy of awareness. We think he's the enemy, the wrong is out there, things are bad, they're out there, and I'm just responding to them. What we forget, if we don't bring the aspect of wisdom, is that this arises from inside. Actually, everything that arises is projected from me, through me. And that is what kind of the division between ignorance and knowing lies in understanding that what I experience as out there is projected from in here, because it is projected through the whole package of what I am. So the enemy is not, doesn't arise only from on the exterior side. It also the enemy also arises by me projecting that being or that situation as an obstacle or an enemy. We are in a dance together, because I could also see that person as something else. I could see that person, for example, as a person being overcome by the addiction of anger, by the affliction of negative emotion, and I can have compassion toward that person. But that requires dropping that ignorance of things out there are real just as I see them, because that ignorance, that very kind of childlike mental condition, is the condition that doesn't know that I bring a lot of what I perceive to that. I bring the internal to the external, and they're always in this kind of a dance together. That what I perceive can never arise independently of how I see things, as long as I don't really penetrate and understand, my true condition. Um, So in Buddhism, we work with that. We try to dismantle it, uh, because this mind that divides everything into two parts and sees the other, and sees the other only in terms of the self. There is no way we can look at anything if we don't bring the self into it, because ultimately, who is looking at things? It is us. So the self always comes in, and depending on the condition of the self, of our awareness of the condition of the self and the state of the self based on our awareness, is what determines our perception. It's like saying that, we are the mirror, so we're both the perpetrator and the victim. What we bring in determines what we see. And that is where the divide line between awareness and unawareness or ignorance happens. The grasping to the self, therefore, is the split of subject-object grasping mental condition, and cannot see anything really, because it filters everything through this broken prism, which always favors the self, of course. And it happens very, very unconsciously. We're not even aware, but we've already projected what is going to happen on the outside. We've already determined how that person is going to be, but we're not aware of it. In that kind of ignorant, childish condition, we think, oh, that person is really bad. Oh, this situation is really horrendous and like this and like that. And, we objectify this judgment, and we forget that it actually arises from inside. Because what we see arises from the totality of what we are. In Buddhism, we refer to the split perception as appearance, as ignorance, as an illusion. And we are encouraged to see it as a dream. We are encouraged to look and remind ourselves to keep looking at this relative level of reality as not something that's real, but more like a dream, because we are aware that what we see happens in conjunction of this inner and outer. And it's a co-creation. It's like a dance in which we always participate. So walking through the world with that reminder, with that awareness, keeps us balanced. In this context, Buddhism speaks of, when we try to understand like the mechanical parts of it, how does this happen? Buddhism speaks of the aggregate of 8 consciousnesses. This is the ordinary way we perceive the world. The world is perceived as this aggregate of 8 components. And what are they? What is this makeup of this ordinary dualistic conception? This dualistic mind consists of first it's a pile of 8 elements, and the first of these 8 is the 1 through 5 sensory consciousnesses: smell, sight, touch,
Taste.
smell, seeing, hearing, sensing, taste, and auditory consciousness. No, I already said that.
5 senses: seeing, hearing, taste, touch, and smell.
So these sensory consciousnesses, when the information through them arrives to us, they are then processed by the 6 and it's still considered kind of like connected to the sensory consciousness, is called mental consciousness. It's what takes that information and then organizes it and names it. We are therefore able to experience things as something. This is Michael, he's wearing glasses, this is his hair, that is his ear. That's the work of 6 sensory consciousness. And then we have the 7th consciousness, and it is called the afflictive consciousness, because that is where the ego and the afflictive emotions that filter that information of the 5 sensory and the mental consciousness. That the 7th consciousness is what says, I like this, I don't like this, this is bad, this is good, I want this, and I have so much desire, I must have it, or I hate it. That is the work of 7th consciousness. And all of that, all this aggregate of 7 consciousnesses happens within the 8th consciousness. It's when we've been talking about for the few weeks, using the metaphor of the screen and the movies. So the movies are projected on the screen, and the 8th consciousness is that screen. Without the screen, there are no movies. This 8th consciousness is not only the essential cognitive nature of mind, the screen, where the movies are experienced and arise. It is also where it is called the store consciousness, the alaya consciousness, the store consciousness. It is like this space, which also not just where things are projected onto the screen of awareness, but it's also where habitual propensities store themselves. Not physical objects, but repeated actions and flavors of these actions store themselves. So if I spend a lot of times being angry, that sensation, that energy is stored in the 8th consciousness, and we tend to re-trigger it and reactivate it, like little seeds. When they meet rain and light, they're re-triggered, they're resurgent again, and so we see the world in a continuous flow of those deposited afflictive emotions, these traces. It's like an empty perfume bottle which still holds the odor of the scent that is no longer there. And that empty bottle, even when filled with new things, influences that old odor, influences and corrupts any new scent which is poured into it, unless we really, really clean it. We'll get to that, this cleaning out. Disorder are the karmic traces, which must be cleaned and removed if we wish to see the true ground, our Buddha nature. Because as long as we have these traces, we will continue to react and enact and create ignorance and continue to want, to live in this conceptual samsara causing, creating mind. The eighth consciousness, when it is cleansed of afflictions, when all the stains are wiped away from it, this ground, it's called the ground consciousness, the store consciousness, becomes what is referred to in Buddhism as alaya jnana, wisdom mind. But when it is stained by the afflictive seventh consciousness, it is a storehouse of ignorance. It is called alaya vijnana. It is the ignorance. So this is kind of like the samsara and nirvana that are always, always together. With stains, it is this ignorant suffering consciousness. Without stains, it is the wisdom liberated consciousness. The alaya consciousness, when it is turned outward, is a mere repository of the traces of our experiences and our afflictions, because our experiences are so based on our afflictions, based on our what we've deposited and what we've reenacted and habituated through our seventh consciousness. It is so much what we do. It's not so much what we do, but the qualities of mental states in which we manifest our body, speech, and mind. These deposited traces of our activities through the three doors influence and reignite similar experiences and force us into repetition of similar perceptions of our previous experiences and actions. So if we habituate states of anger, states of jealousy, or similar kind of mental afflictive states, it is most likely that we will continue to encounter our entire world will arise over and over and over as this horrible place filled with horrible things, affliction upon, obstacle upon obstacle, a bad person after a bad person. This is kind of like what PTSD is, but remember that what it is in its kind of structural nature is us projecting and reigniting out of anger and seeing the world as a dangerous place, seeing all beings as these corrupt, horrible beings, and then reacting and responding to our own projection and experiencing everything just like that. This is what is stored in the eighth consciousness when it is just the alaya vijnana, the consciousness of ignorance. The eighth consciousness and the habitual propensities stored in it are continuously and repetitively reenacted. And this is the cause of samsara, and another word of it is suffering. So if we keep meeting what we call horrible people, enemies out there, if our world is continuously experienced by us as this horrible place, we have to know that we are projecting it, and then we're experiencing it like that. As practitioners, this is the house cleaning that we have to get to. When meeting difficult external circumstances, we must penetrate to the substance and the basis, which is us on the inside. We are the ones who are bringing and projecting those afflictive emotions upon the world. And so as practitioners, when we encounter what's out there, we are now aware that what's out there is what's also in here. We know that the in here is what we experience as out there. The out there in the world I meet is a result of my previous actions and my propensities stored inside me, my likes and dislikes, etc. are the way, this is the way I experience absolutely everything, and that nothing else is possible at all, because we will always only experience through what is stored inside us, how we perceive the world. You know, our world is what we think of it, and then we experience it. So if we want to change our world to be a beautiful place, to meet beautiful people, we have to liberate ourselves from viewing everything as this horrible place with filled with horrible beings. This is when we become practitioners, and you know, we enter a kind of a state of mind where we understand the workings of karma, and we are liberated from the afflictive disease of looking at everything in this way. So what is the counterbalance? What is the mind that is counter to this ignorance, this alaya vijnana? And that is the mind of bodhicitta, of compassion. Awareness that is liberating itself moment by moment of dualistic grasping, that sees wheels of reality arising internally within a state of complete knowing. It is a level state quality of awareness that sees the workings of our ordinary grasping mind moment by moment. And all of us have experienced that, at least in some form, at some time in our life. Anyone who's dealt with addiction and who's worked against it on how to dismantle it has experienced it. When we have and are battling addiction, we bring this bigger lamp of mind, and moment by moment, literally breath by breath, we're countering this affliction, this addiction. First, we're kind of dismantling like the physical level of it, but then we must, if we ever want to end the addiction, we must go to the subtle levels of energy of where it arose, you know, the desire or the hatred. Because some of us may say, well, I drink because the world is a horrible place, so we have to like take out the seed of hatred. We have to take out the seed of desire. I must have it. So it's moment by moment by moment. It's not like I woke up this morning, I said, well, I'm not going to be an addict, I'm going to be fine, and nothing's going to trigger me. No, it's work moment by moment. And that's really what practice is. Except here we're not battling, let's say, you know, addiction to drugs, addiction to food, addiction to alcohol. We are battling the addiction to negative afflictive mental states, all of them. We're cleaning the store consciousness, because when the store consciousness, when it's turned inward in order to do this work, is cleansed, and it has always been pure. These stains are called adventitious stains in Buddhism. When we clean it, it is really who we are. And so the mind of bodhicitta, the mind of love and compassion, the only antidote to this mind of ignorance is not to be understood as some kind of nice guy. Once in a while, I give somebody $1 and they leave me alone. You know, no, the mind of bodhicitta is that big lamp that we bring into the addiction, into, and illuminate all the spaces of where all of these afflictive emotions that lead to addictions and that are addictions, and we've experienced them over and over again, that they come with us from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime and become stronger. By bringing this huge lamp of awareness, this mind of bodhicitta, it's the only way we can battle and we can change, and we can get back to our true nature. So please don't confuse it with some ordinary nice guy mental state. You know, this nice guy mental state is also afflictive mind, because it makes us feel good. You know, it is not kind of like the real uh, awareness that never stops shining. It's not like the will to battle the addiction. You know, that's what we have to bring with ourselves, this moment to moment consciousness that is always checking and saying, Am I acting now out of benefit for all sentient beings? Or, is this me just acting for a moment, making myself feel good because for a minute I may be generous or alleviate some little things, but ultimately I grasp to doing that. I grasp to feeling good. I grasp to this activity as something still ultimately selfish. So the work we do is to liberate afflictions, and Dzongtsar Khyentse Rinpoche says, do not mistaken meditation for anything other. Meditation is a skillful means that is only and always designed for liberation. What do we liberate? We liberate afflictive emotions. We liberate ignorance. We liberate our true basic nature, alaya jnana, this wisdom nature, from the alaya vijnana, which is like, this is alaya jnana, this is alaya vijnana, when I'm grasping with my ego and the five afflictive emotions. I'm going back to this. I am giving, not grabbing. When we work with our nature like that, have to always think about how powerful our mind is, right? Because if we liberate one afflictive emotion, we liberate one thought of I hate you, or this is horrible, the world is a horrible, we liberate just this one moment, one thought that arises as the afflictive, as a result of an afflictive emotion, we liberate all beings from this afflictive emotion. We are a drop in the ocean. So when that drop becomes pure, it affects the whole infinite ocean. I mean, that's how powerful everything our mind is. It's not insignificant to liberate just one single moment of an afflictive emotion, because we liberate all sentient beings and all of reality from that negativity. And of course, we are included in that liberation. And that's really what bodhicitta mind is. It's like this giant lamp that always shines on all the dark corners where we're not hiding. Oh, I'm going to be a good guy for 3 seconds. So I'm going to do this thing and volunteer, and then I'm all done. No, that work happens moment by moment by moment. It's like battling any other addiction. We have to be on it all the time. And many of us who have actually battled addictions, alcoholism, drugs, other addictions, we know that even when we're free of it, seemingly free of it for many years, every so often it'll still arise. And that's why the mind, bodhicitta mind, that lamp has to be there all the time, because stuff keeps arising over and over out of that stored consciousness. Very, very difficult, but there's nothing more worthy. I mean, and there's really no, kind of like the precious human existence is not given to us for anything else except to wipe the stains from our true nature, from our bodhicitta, And when our store consciousness becomes this pure space of awareness, like we quoted last week from that documentary, when you go beyond this conceptual mind, in parentheses of dualistic grasping and ignorance, there's nothing there but love, because there's nothing else but compassion in that kind of spaciousness. And that's really what practice is to little by little keep removing the stains, cleaning the house. It's continuous work. It's moment by moment work. It's not, I'm going to sit on the cushion for 20 minutes, but then I'm going to go out, get off my cushion, go out there and do what I always do, and be this crappy person projecting all the negativity and bringing that negativity with me into the world. So when we meditate, please think of all these layers, and please become aware when thoughts arise, especially when those thoughts are not just the six consciousnesses of the senses and mental consciousness, but when thoughts arise, I like this, I don't like this, I desire this, I hate that person, or become very, very aware that that's what we have to dismantle. That's what we have to clean, and use the time of sitting in meditation really working with cleaning the stains of afflictive emotions. They're not our nature. They're just our habit. It's like any other addiction. It starts at some point, and it's up to us to bring an end to it completely and ultimately. And so that's the kind of work that we do in meditation.
So with that in mind, let's sit and, this kind of work can't be done without sitting practice of meditation, habituating that and that becoming something we're very familiar with that we could bring into, our daily life, looking at our mind and seeing what's going on there. If we don't have the ability to check into that, there's no way to work with these afflictive emotions. So that's why we meditate, not just to feel good or, as someone said, not just to, start the day with meditation so we can go out and be great masters of samsara. There's something else going on. She eloquently described a lot of it, but that's why we sit. We'll do a detailed review of meditation technique in the new year. Those of you, if you are new and never done this before, you'll just have to bear with us. There is a review of the techniques that we do here in the first class of this year, which is on our YouTube. But for now, let's sit in our posture, and with the first breath, settle into the sky-like nature of mind, as we say, the calmness of it, the clarity of it. With the first breath, you're in your pose, in your posture, settle, breathe, and look at the mind as we start to sit.
And try to bring a lot of spaciousness when you're meditating. Just openness and just an ability to be receptive to whatever comes and letting it arise and go.
Great. Okay. Okay, let's go to some questions. What exercises can I apply in day-to-day life to avoid looking back in anger to people who wronged me?
You know, the only way we can dismantle is first the bringing the awareness of knowing that the wronged, that I and how the inner and the outer are a continuous dance, but there's no outer without first the inner. So when I project the world in a particular way, beings who wrong me arise together with that perception. You know, as long as we keep going back and saying they hurt me, we can never get out of the cycle. Those are exactly the mechanisms of how samsara, or another word for it, suffering, is created and karma is created. We'll keep re-triggering and meeting that, because in a way it's like if our eyes are defective and we're looking at the world with those eyes, and those eyes tell us the world is horrendous, we will keep meeting the world as a horrendous place. So the change really has to happen in abandoning that version. Because remember, I mean, awareness is knowing that uh, I write the movie, but I am the star of the movie. You know, I arise together with my version of the world. And so it's recreating a version of the world, putting it into a bigger lens and understanding. You know, it's from the moment we can say, I am so ordinary, I'm just like other beings. I cause afflictions, I cause suffering. I also engage in those same kinds of acts of violence as they do. And when I can say that to myself and have forgiveness and understand this ordinary condition of all of us kind of seeped in that afflictive behavior, we can expand beyond those boundaries, and we can create a version of a movie where we can look at ourselves with compassion and others with compassion. It's only when we really alter the version of the world can we become a star in that version of the world, who is not always assailed by horrible people, who is not always meeting with difficulties and obstacles. We cannot divorce or separate the inner and the outer. The subject and the object are always intertwined. It's only by really changing the inner that the outer is going to change. If we're always meeting things, the sticks and stones, with other sticks and stones, our experience will always be like that. You know, we can never walk away from our inside. We bring ourselves to everything. We can go to another planet and meet the same kinds of things. So until the inner changes, the outer is a reflection of the inner. It's like a stone, and when lights hit that stone, you know, it's like a prism. All these circumstances arise, but they all come from the single source. So until the source, the mind, does not change, until we look at reality, we make a conscious choice of having forgiveness for others, and in that have forgiveness for ourselves, and saying, I can see a different version of others. After all, it's just our judgment, you know? Pretend you're a doctor working in a hospital with very, very afflicted, sick people, and if they're throwing chairs at you, not to be triggered and respond in the like manner and throw a chair at them, but saying, okay, I understand where this is coming from, and I will work with that in a different manner. And that includes also working really with forgiving yourself as well, and finding the causes, finding the root source. Where does this anger arise in me, and letting that go. You have to dismantle the root causes, the seeds. Forget about working with effects if you're not working with the causes. You have to find in yourself by examining, analyzing yourself. Why are you so attached to seeing the world only in such a way? And when you find that moment of where the addiction sets in, you got to dismantle it at the source, because uh, we can all be different beings, uh, if we really want to. But that only can happen when we let go of the addiction of anger.
Constantly working with the mind and afflictive emotions in everyday life can feel exhausting. Is it okay to sometimes just relax into awareness and let everything else go? You're dealing with your mind whether you're being aware of what's going on or not, whether you're aware that you have afflictive emotions or not, Being dominated by afflictive emotions is without a doubt exhausting. Maybe what you're saying is working, kind of trying to cultivate an awareness of what's going on in your mind and seeing the afflictive emotions. The fact that there's work to be done might seem daunting, but what's the alternative? I mean, your alternative is say, is it okay to sometimes just relax into awareness and let everything go? If you can relax into awareness and have a spacious, calm quality there, that's pretty amazing. Because you're saying relax into awareness. You're not saying relax into unawareness and distraction and, being consumed by projections and outer things. So I'm not exactly sure. Maybe you feel burdened by this responsibility to take responsibility for your own, afflictive emotions, but it's only going to make things better, because those things are going to be there. Relaxing into awareness is not really letting everything else go. Those are two kind of contradictory things in a way. Because awareness is the opposite of just being lost in distraction and projection. Do you want to add to anything to that?
Two things: the relative level, the whole wheels and mechanisms of addiction, samsara, the suffering, working. It's like clearing addiction on a physical level, on a mental level, on an emotional level, and then on kind of really awareness level, is done by also touching and settling with the empty screen, so to say, settling in our bigger sense of non-conceptual awareness. Remember, there's two kinds of, and they're not two kinds of awareness. There is the self-aware awareness, non-conceptual, exceeding the conceptual awareness, where all things can arise. That's the empty screen. That's kind of the base nature. Settling in that is tremendous. And we always want to do that. So it's very, very important. At the same time, when arising and the churning is happening, uh, making sure that that awareness encapsulates and works on releasing the toxicity, the fumes, moment by moment. So if you are not plagued by it, you don't have to regurgitate it. You work on the toxicity and releasing the addiction of negative afflictive emotion when it arises. If you can settle in open awareness, that's it's amazing. It's great.
Uh, you have both given me a lot to be thankful for, and I appreciate you have given me as a person practicing what you've shared. What can I do for you? Keep practicing. Really, that's the best thing you could do for us and anybody.
Thank you.
When interacting with the world, particularly through social media and world events reflected there, how do you keep a tranquil mind? Does it seem built to overwhelm? That's why we're here. That's why we're practice. Turn to Dharma, practice Buddhism, practice meditation, things like that. That's how you keep a tranquil mind. It's not going to come from it's not going to come from sorting out all those events. and what's reflected there. It's going to come from your own ability to deal with it. Sure, if you're on social media and you're constantly looking at the news and things like that, it can be absolutely overwhelming. It's so many distractions and so much information to process all the time. You could start to reduce your exposure to that. I mean, just on a personal level, like lately, I leave the house for a few hours without my phone on purpose. So that time I'm out, I'm not just compulsively checking emails and Instagram or whatever, the news and things like that, which I have a kind of a compulsion to do when I have my the distraction is so easy all the time. New information, new information, new information, new message, new post. You can take those steps, but really, no better antidote than I think practice. Dharma practice.
And also sorting out, if our interaction with social media has become an addiction, and understanding that there are wheels and things, mechanisms in place where our perception of the world is very influenced and tailored to sell us certain things, to make us feel in a certain way, so that then things can be peddled to us in different packages. So stepping away from being addicted to social media, also just having spaciousness of the mind, is very, very key. Because like Michael said, there's no matter how much of being inside the supermarket, going through from aisle to aisle to aisle, where every so often we have to get out of that and just look at the blue sky, and that's very important.
How can you succinctly tell someone to not be triggered by anger? It may be hard to get them to meditation. I don't know if you should be telling people not to be triggered by anger or trying to get them to meditation. I mean, you can, mention that you do it, and you can practice and hopefully become some kind of example for people. But to tell people not to be triggered by anger is a tricky one. You might make them more angry. Pointing out people's faults, if they didn't specifically ask you to do that, can really backfire very often. Of course, establishing boundaries and expressing when you feel wronged and you feel hurt and you feel this person, or if you're witnessing them committing some kind of unjust thing, of course. But, you have to, use discernment to figure that out, because it's, they may never get to meditation. Not everybody is going to. Not everybody's going to practice, and not everyone's going to do that. And there's so many people in our immediate life, family, friends, circles, we've been connected to these practices and teachers and Buddhism and all that for many, many years, have no interest in it. That's okay. I'm not going to, I'm sure there's been times we've suggested it or said this could really be helpful or something like that. But, this is, what is that expression? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink. Something like that. I don't know. But you have to, I think the best thing you do is be an example, and people may see changes in you if you really take these things to heart, these teachings and practices. And that may be enough. And as Victoria said, if you conquer one negative emotion, you know what I mean? One negative thought that comes, one impulse, that's one less negative component released into the world, especially into your immediate circle, which will have the first reverberations of that, right? I'm grateful I joined the session today. Does that feeling of gratitude add to the cleansing of the eighth sense, or is this feeling just considered the flip side of fear that I might not have been able to access this Zoom meeting?
I mean, becoming aware is, obviously a benefit of all benefits, because that's really what our precious human life is supposed to be. Don't worry and don't belabor it with all kinds of labels. You got onto the Zoom session. it gave you a moment of ability to be clear about certain things, and that's what's key. There's no reason to give it other names, titles, and things like that. We're all learning here in this practice session. We are all working with our ordinary emotions. The reason why, for example, I allow myself to speak about these things is because I feel so not ordinary in any way, and I feel so close and similar to so many of us by having first addictions to anger, later these addictions leading to use of drugs and alcohol and things like this, and then climbing back out of these things by dismantling their structures, by really dismantling the emotional structures of afflictive emotions. We are so much more similar than we are different, and no need to separate yourself and be harsh on yourself. Just bring your mind to the things that you do, and have patience.
How do I forgive myself for past actions that I'm ashamed of? There's a bunch of questions about forgiveness. Someone else is asking, how do I forgive my partner of many years for cheating and leaving the marriage? Just to know, forgiveness is not something that's always very commonly talked about in Buddhism as it is in some other religions. I mean, I was raised Catholic, and forgiveness is a big component and thing you kind of hear over and over again. And it's not something that's always, you forgive people who are, it's not something that's harped on in Buddhism, first of all. Does that mean we don't do it? Not necessarily, but forgiveness we do really out of our own for sense and for our own mind. So we're not stuck on these feelings of being wronged and hurt and slighted. We're not doing it for the benefit of the other person. I absolve you of you wronging me so they can go on and do it. That's not what we're doing here. We always talk about being a Buddhist as not being a doormat. Establishing boundaries is very important, you know. Being wronged by someone we love is often very hard to get over. We're not saying you're going to sit and meditate away in one session the feeling of being wronged by someone you've been with for 17 years who's hurt you. It may take quite a while. I always use the example of, I know a lot of people who felt their parents hurt them when they were being raised. Now they're in their 60s, 50s, still going to therapy, talking about this parent who's been dead for 20 years now and how the parent treated them and wronged them. Well, you're living with that hurt over and over and over and over again. You're not letting it go. Who's suffering, by holding on to the resentment, by holding on to the anger, so to make some kind of actual effort to forgive, that person suffered because of their, abuse of you, or, wrong, committing wrong acts to you. But you want to transcend that. You want to transcend that. And it's not going to come from condemnation. It comes from establishing boundaries, but just saying, having compassion, saying that person did the best they could, I guess. You know what I mean? Establishing a boundary, moving away from it. The act of forgiving is not to absolve them. I'm trying to make a distinction that's kind of subtle, but same thing with forgiving yourself. Past actions that you're ashamed of. Well, you're aware that you committed these. You're aware that they made you ashamed, and you resolve yourself, not make resolution not to do it again. Learning that this action causes a lot of suffering. That's where the forgiveness is. The forgiveness is moving away from it and moving forward.
In Buddhism, what we call in the West forgiveness has to do with something that in Buddhism we call it a letting go and liberating, right? Letting go is kind of like the first mechanical thing of saying I can be free of that, and bringing like the mind of compassion to oneself and to others by simply knowing that when people do things we call bad or horrible, etc., it's all based on ignorance. So, if we take the word ignorance and use a synonym of mental illness, it helps us, because when we have complete clarity and control, when our mind is like a big luminous lamp, of course we won't do those kinds of things, but we're not always capable of bringing that mind until it takes, it takes a lot to cultivate that kind of mind and bringing it. But if you wish to be forgiven, you make confession and you vow never ever ever to drop those qualities that led you, or that mental that mind that led you to do those actions that you consider negative actions. And you can do tonglen. You don't need the person in front of you, even when the person is gone, not living any longer. You can visualize a person in front of you and send them the white light in the practice of tonglen, and absorb the negative light, let's say the one you yourself cause, from that person. It's the giving and receiving practice of tonglen, taking the dark, absorbing it into your heart center, and from the heart center sending on the breath out the white light. And of course, we have to liberate ourselves from holding on to the anger that we carry against the other person who perpetrated us. Remember, nothing really arises unless we were a part of it. The karmic seed of this dance together, in which we only arise in conjunction with the world. That means in conjunction with others. We're a part of that dance. So letting go, having the spaciousness of the mind, having the spaciousness of the mind is the mind of compassion. As long as we kind of have this me mind, they hurt me, they did this to me, how dare they do this to me, as long as we sustain that mind, there is no hope. PTSD is the only thing that's ever going to happen to us. What is PTSD? We project this the world as this horrible environment with horrible beings in it, and we experience it as a victim or whatever, who's always meeting suffering and obstacles and difficulties in this life. This whole mind of why do nice people get bad things happen to these nice people, it's a wrong view of things. That's really not understanding the workings of karma. And how we dismantle it is, first we let go of these hurts and complaints and seeing the world in that negative way, and we liberate ourselves and we liberate all others from that. And that's how we work with that as practitioners.
This is going back to the quote on anger, which I found on Pema Lotus Instagram page. That's our friend Dharma sister Shamel, who so generously has that page with so many great teachings and teachers and quotes. You should all follow it. Anger can be used for good if we believe in something, don't you think? I don't know. If we believe in something, that can be used for good. Anger is kind of a emotional byproduct of our reaction to situation. Like I said, righteous, like again, you mentioned here, how do we not get carried away in its righteousness? That's a good question. How do we not get carried away in its righteousness? By kind of almost separating the anger from the righteousness. Belief in something, a sense of righteousness, can definitely be used for good and can align with your values of right or wrong. I think anger as an energetic thing is not necessarily the positive aspects of believing in a cause or feeling righteousness. I think it's important to make that distinction. I think you can be a lot more effective in however you want to support this belief in something, or however you want to support this idea of righteousness, if your anger is worked with rather than just let run rampant.
Also, seeing the wrongs in the world does not require afflictive emotions. Actually, there is no clarity if we're seeing
Mm.
through afflictive emotions. Being possessed by afflictive emotion is like driving in a car set on fire, which is going to crash into, a crowd of people or someone's home or something like this. So there is never anything like talking about this righteous anger, because seeing the wrongs of the world and trying to cure them can never be based on an afflictive emotion. An afflictive emotion that's tied only to us and our sense of, this little, judgment. Uh, if we wish to be doctors in a mental institution, we have to hold the world in the mind of bodhicitta. We must start with compassion. We can never do anything effectively in this world without the mind of compassion, because we will always then there's no alternative. It's either the mind of compassion that sees and understands, or this perverted sick gaze to the world that always sees the place as the world as a sick, bad, scary place. And how will we ever act when we project that onto the world? So there is no clarity of seeing the world through afflictive emotion. The very definition of ignorance is seeing the world through an afflictive emotion. Anger is the very first kind of thing. But if you take that energy, the fuel of anger, and put it into and transpose it into a compassionate activity, which has to be based on a mind that can see with that kind of frightening clarity, you can accomplish a lot of things. But please, no mistake, there's no afflictive emotion that can carry you anywhere to anything positive. No such thing.
Except the liberation of it.
Except when you're liberating it. Yeah, and you can only liberate it out of great, great clarity and compassion, because clarity and compassion are one and the same thing. It's like warmth and brightness of the sun. They're not two separate things, and the sun shines equally on all kinds of beings, the ones we call good and bad, right? The sun has the capacity of shining and being luminous, and bringing the warmth, the sustaining life without inequanimity. The one of the immeasurables, the fourth immeasurable, when we say, and may the rest in equanimity, free from aversion, hatred and aversion. This is very important. If we can bring the sun and be the sun, it's the only way we can bring anything to the world. The opposite is just this ubiquitous darkness and crashing, in a burning car into a crowd of people. I mean, please, let's never mistake afflictive emotions for something that can produce something positive, unless we liberate it.
Okay, last question, then we'll have to close. Is unrequited love afflictive emotion? Neither myself nor this other person is in a relationship. I've felt this for a while and enjoy the feeling, but I'm unsure if this desire will cause harm.
I mean, there are many kinds of love, and if we're speaking about love that is a disturbing emotion and affliction, where the desire can be already borderline, I must have this, I need this, I want this, and can cause this addictive behavior, surely you have to be aware that that is not, first of all, it's hard to call that love. That's something else. Love is something that can accept and stay and permeate the situation no matter what the outcome is. Love, compassion, love, real love, is never anything based on the projected results of how we want the outcome to be. Love is just it. It's like the sun. It is there with whatever the little insects on the planet Earth are doing. That's love. When we confuse this emotional sense of desire and we call it love, we just have to be very clear about what we're engaging in, whether we're engaging in love or I want you, an afflictive desire. So, just being very, very careful. If you can love that person, be like the sun and bring the luminosity and the warmth, no matter what the outcome. This is how our teachers are. No matter what the outcome, I mean, they love us all unconditionally, and we keep being so stupid day and night. I mean, I'm talking about myself. And my teacher, I feel the love no matter what I do, because my teacher is like the sun that can shine on me no matter what the outcome, you know? And knowing this presence, understanding that, just, you know, always blows me away.
And it's also important to really, we're talking about afflictive emotions like anger, or maybe this kind of love, unrequited love or desire, something like that. To not always think of it wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. You know what I mean? As a moral kind of judgment, it's, you know, we're not saying this is the wrong way to do things. It's like you can choose to do whatever you want. You know what I mean? It's like how do we want to express this energy? How do we want to work with our mind? How do we want to engage with the world? You know, let's not fall into that kind of just like, I'm not saying being angry is wrong about a cause or thing. That's not at all. You know, we're talking about working with the emotion of anger and how that can be destructive, because absolutely can. You know, when you know, anger is given free reign and things like that, there's without a doubt it can cloud you. It can, you said it before, it can you know,
It's a distortion.
remove the clarity. You know, it's the absence of clarity and things like that.
And in this, you know, in your question, to return to it, you know, more directly, it's just you watching your mind. Can you just love that person and be aware when the tentacles of I want this from you, I want that from you, and if you don't give it to me, these are gonna be my sticky, impulsive responses. If you can love without the stickiness, you know, it's wonderful. And who knows, you know, maybe that kind of, that big luminous love may shine on that person may be drawn to that naturally, but the person will also know and feel, we all instinctually know when someone has like another agenda or that stickiness. It's very palpable, you know. And just working with your mind, not judging it, but working with it.
Okay, we went over a lot of time today. Sorry about that, but most of you stayed with us anyway. So, well, let's dedicate the and maybe for the rest of the 2 weeks this year, we're not meeting, but if any of the, especially the Buddhist concepts and ideas that we talk about, if you are inspired and you haven't really connected with an authentic teacher from an authentic lineage, well worth the effort to try to do that, to make some connection and see where it leads. On the website of Solidago Productions, there's several teachers and books by them, and there's lots of websites, and there's not Zoom, YouTube teachings, videos, and you can get on their list. You could attend virtual retreats and teachings and in person. They're available. They're in the world. This wisdom tradition is alive and accessible and in the world, and we always encourage make contact with a teacher. Let's dedicate the merit from today's session for the benefit of all beings. By this merit, may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. And thank you, Nick Solidio.
Thank you all.
See you.
Thank you. Happy holidays.